Zaten mes kono dreaming би жоохон Монгол хэлтэй гэдэг энэсэдэв монголоор ярих жоохон хэцүү учраас би ерөнхийдөө англиар ярина. Гэхдээ зарим юм монголоор тайлбарч болно. Асуулт юм байвал. So good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Andrew Colwell, and I come from 10 years of doing ethnomusicology, music research in Mongolia. In ethnomusicology, and recently I began working at the Center for Traditional Music and Dance in New York City. And I would like to talk about the organization and a new program that I am hoping to explore with various inter-Asian, Mongolian, and Turkic communities in New York City. And 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 of course, this paper is also an opportunity for me to get input from members of these communities here as well and see where we go from there in the future. Let me turn on my stopwatch because time is cancel. Stop. Okay. So, so my research was mainly on Humi and globalization, and what I did as an ethnomusicologist was talk directly with people, doing ethnography, interviews, archival research, actually going and getting people's own perspectives and seeing what that means and how that shapes our understandings of a social group or a topic like globalization. Instead of writing about globalization and seeing what the literature says, what the numbers say, I would talk to people and see how they actually experience and deal with globalization, for example, in the context of music and especially throat singing or humi. So the Center for Traditional Music and Dance is actually an organization that uses those kinds of skills to help the situations of immigrant communities in New York City. So it's been around for 50 years, as you can see here, and it focuses primarily on New York City's immigrant communities and seeks to help them preserve the vitality of their distinctive performing arts traditions, and in the process promotes cross-cultural understanding by sharing these art forms with audiences across the city. And obviously in the context of the current administration and policy climate, this is especially important. But it's also been integral to the history of New York City, especially New York City is a city of immigrants, and the immigrant population is huge. I don't have specific numbers for you, but the city, of course, is based upon this traditions and culture of new peoples coming regularly through Ellis Island, especially, of course, and that continues on today as well. So in the late 1960s, Ethel Rame and Martin Koenig, the founders of the Center for Traditional Music and Dance, started noticing how the demographics of New York City were changing because of the new immigration laws in the 1960s. And suddenly the diversity of immigration to New York changed dramatically. And they through their own, they started learning how some about the experiences of these immigrant communities as they sought to make new lives and livelihoods in New York City, and learning how that new experience was shaping the futures and practice of their traditional arts, and especially music and dance. And they saw that there was often communities that would come to New York and might have practitioners, artists, dancers, musicians, tradition bearers who were very important, but the community might not have the knowledge, the experience, and the connections to benefit from the resources and that are out there from New York City or from the state, New York State, or from the national government. And so they sought to assist and help and facilitate these communities starting in the 1970s through community-driven, ethnographically grounded projects. And that 50 years later, the 50th anniversary was just 3 years ago. 50 years later, the center has worked with countless communities, immigrant communities in New York City that have led to the foundation of self-sustaining independent cultural organizations, ensembles, festivals, annual programming events. The list goes on and on and on. And that work continues today with various other communities, and most recently the Sri Lankan community. But now that I've started working there, I am hoping to do the same with and explore what Mongolian and other Asian communities in New York, how they would be interested in collaborating or not with us, and to address their own musical heritage and cultural organizing needs. And I'll talk about that, of course, in very soon. So to give you an idea of the programming that we do at the center, here's one of from off the website, some of our current programming. So, for example, Yiddish New York focuses on the revival of Yiddish Yiddish language, music, and arts. And that's an annual event that lasts for 5 days, where scholars, community members from the Jewish community gather in New York City at a local synagogue and not only talk about culture and language and music, but also create a space for the next generation to actually learn and use this knowledge and language. And so it's not just talking about, but also helping transmit culture, Yiddish language and culture. We're doing currently an initiative with Sri Lanka, which is consists primarily of an annual festival and a dance showcase and but also a series of dance nights these events were agreed upon through community input and interest. And one of the things they wanted to do was introduce this dance form called baidla into the New York dance scene. So we worked with them to help do that. But also we had our anniversary recently, so we had a concert, a programming series called Made in New York, where we feature the bands and musicians of second generation second generation immigrant New Yorkers, who are New Yorkers and Americans, of course, but whose parents are immigrants. And so a variety of programming that we do, from festivals to concert series to dance, to these long, intensive programs to actually teach skills. But the main thing that we do is these things called sustaining cultures initiatives. They used to be called community cultural initiatives, but in all the cases, what happens is that through long-term collaborative relationships with community organizers and community members, we collaboratively seek to identify, document, and present particular performers who are of course of high artistic quality, but also anyone who has knowledge and insight to music and dance. There have been oral history projects, for example, where to get perspectives of elders on their knowledge of tradition or music or dance. And so it's not just the highest quality professional musicians, but anyone who has insight and knowledge and that's of interest to the community. And so we partner with these artists and community members and organizations over the long term. Over years, not just 1 year and then you finish, but potentially from 2 to 7 to 8 years, and to develop these meaningful relationships. And often the results of these initiatives are self-sustaining community organizations and programming, and that are able to do so by um, learning how to engage the existing granting opportunities in the United States, which is especially one of the things that we're able to help communities do. Um, if you've ever applied for a grant as an organization in the United States, you know what I'm talking about, how hard it is. Permits for programming, building maintenance, um, proving to a granting institution that you are able to um, implement what you said you were going to do with the money that you're going to receive. Beginning that process is very difficult. And but if with a center like ours, which has been doing this for 50 years, we're able to provide that accountability for young or new organizers and immigrant communities and organizations that want to access that funding, but don't have the history that to demonstrate to a granting organization that they're able to implement this funding. So that's where we come in to provide that accountability by helping, acting as an intermediary between the grantors and community members. And then eventually, once the organization learns those skills and gets that accountability, in many cases, as they decide, they might end up becoming an independent organization, doing their own programming. So today, next I'd like to talk about one of these examples of this. And when one of the initiatives we did that lasted, you can see, for 8 years, was the Mexican Community Cultural Initiative. And today we call it Sustaining Cultures Initiative. I don't know why, but it's the same thing. But this initiative focused on the Mexican community in New York because at that time it was growing very quickly. And so through various connections, the Center for Traditional Music and Dance ended up learning about and connecting with certain organizers and musicians, and started exploring ideas of ways of collaborating together. And they connected with some very talented musicians and organizers. And in one case, there were mariachi musicians who are now very well renowned. They're it's like the only mariachi academy and ensemble on the East Coast. Everything else is in the Southwest or in California. So we helped these musicians create the Mariachi Academy of New York. But another thing that happened was that we helped and worked with another set of organizers and helped them to create the organization that they wanted for themselves, and that became Mano a Mano Mexican Culture Without Borders. And so this is taken from their website, this is their description, and this is how they present themselves. So a New York-based nonprofit dedicated to celebrating Mexican culture in the United States, and very importantly, promoting understanding of Mexican traditions among not only immigrants and artists and educators, but the general public as well. So it's not just about in-reach, but also about outreach in this case. And they do, and of course, like, through the collaborations that they had with the Center for Traditional Music and Dance, they attended independent, nonprofit 501c3 status in 2006. So it took 6 years for them to achieve that independence. That's how hard it is, and but you can do it, and it's very possible. And through the work that I've been doing so far, I've met many organizers in various Mongolian and Turkic communities in New York City who have achieved various levels of success in the path towards organizing successfully. But there's a lot of there to facilitate, as I've learned, and I'll talk about that very soon. But as you can see, the work that they do leads to international collaboration with not just in New York, but outside of New York, and with international organizations, museums, and local cultural partners. And these events also bridge relationships between the Mexican community and the non-Mexican community, the general community. So one of the things I'd like to briefly present a little bit of what this looks like, because this work is not just a talk, it's not just numbers, it's people experiencing and sharing their perspectives and organizing together, and that's where it all begins, with these human relationships. So this is a video from Mano a Mano introducing how they celebrate and the Mexican Day of the Dead. And when I see this, I think about a lot of the organizations and events I've seen here through the Mongolian Cultural Association Center. But let me get the volume up.
It's a celebration that is done in Mexico. It usually takes 4 to 5 days. It's a celebration of the Day of the Dead. It's a 2,000-year-old tradition from the Americas. We recreate here what is done in Mexico. We put a community altar. First, we put a picture of the person who passed away, who we're remembering. And then we put bread, food, whatever the person liked.
Of course. Why is that not showing? Yeah, the browser won't go in there. Yeah, I put escape and then I clicked. Of course. Stupid. Okay. Anyway, I only have 5 minutes left, so we'll just skip it. Not this one. Okay, so in the video, you'll see various practitioners or organizers talk about how they celebrate the Day of the Dead and how they have gotten not only Mexican community members, but also members of other communities to participate annually in that celebration, and adopting and adapting to this Mexican tradition, and also learning more about the Mexican community through that celebration. So what does that do? It not only transmits tradition to the next generation of first generation American Mexicans, but through public participation, creates public understanding, and in the context of New York, which is a highly diverse, and so that presents particular challenges and opportunities, but this bridges the gap between outreach and inreach, and public understanding and community or understanding, which is especially important today, of course, if we think about the context. So, back to my slide. So, in the context of, so far, I just want to present one example of how this work could matter in the case of Mongolian communities especially. So I was invited by Azza from Mongolia Live to participate in the Marco Polo Festival which is held in Chinatown / Little Italy in New York, like downtown Manhattan. And one of the reasons why was because they have this parade where they have these large figures of Kublai Khan and Marco Polo, and they actually travel down the streets between Little Italy to Chinatown, or I forgot the direction, maybe vice versa. But you know, there's a lot of symbolism there, right? Marco Polo going to Chinatown, etc. But this is the Chinese community taking this figure from Mongolian history, but also Chinese history in terms of the effects that Kublai Khan had on China, and then presenting this aspect of Mongolian heritage from their context, right? And so Azza, of course, wanted to present a Mongolian perspective and contextualize it and demonstrate and hopefully bring in the Mongolian community to participate in that, and also have public engagement through that. So we have in the background the yurt that was built by two Halimak community members as well. And then eventually Adza and Yisun, who is an inner Mongolian living in New York, did a very brief Bilge demonstration that was participatory, right? So you see the Americans like participate, and they were dancing to the Who, which was so it was not like Bilge music, but there was Bilge dancing with like heavy like Mongolian metal, right, and throat singing. But when if you heard the way that Mongolians were being talked about at this event by the organizers, how the aspects of Mongolian history and culture were being presented by the non-Mongolian community, and then also how this intervention happened, then you see a place where this kind of arts programming can come and do some positive work to bring the Mongolian community more visibility. And I will be done in two seconds. So, so this is the Kublai Khan and Marco Polo building of the yurt. And the builders here in this are members of the Chinese community participating and gaining that hands-on knowledge. And so what are the possibilities? You know, once again, there's a lot to be done. You know, partnership building, more field work, and exploring common frames and funding opportunities. And this could be a next initiative at the Center for Traditional Music and Dance. There's various partnerships that we could build upon to do this work. In New York alone, there's Mongol Heritage Foundation, the Kyrgyz American Foundation, which recently opened up a Eurasia Cultural Center, but also Brooklyn Arts Council, the Endangered Language Alliance, and the Mongolian American Cultural Association nearby in Brunswick is also interested in these collaborations because these networks and communities expand beyond New York as well. And we also have this band, Zert, Abu Diab Mongolian band, which is an amazing Bonohoch Dmitry Ayorov, who just moved to Brooklyn. So there's many possibilities for that we're going to explore together in the coming days, and I invite you to participate and give me your ideas and help me understand better what would be best for these communities and possible outcomes, oral history projects, programming, organization building, other collaborative benefits, and so on. So anyway, please contact me, be in touch, and I'd love to hear your perspectives. Thank you very much. Bye. Asok yung bevels, Benno. Kita Amerikan asok asokare tayo. Mongol yarışbaz no otto meni English hasik dostum da. Kaldır bevels to be tell it one da.
Hi, enjoyed your presentation. Just one comment, I guess. I don't know, maybe it was a slip of the tongue, but you mentioned Mongolian culture is part of the Chinese culture.
Oh yeah.
Touchy-feely about that. Just wanted to get the point out there that
of course,
yes, there's inner Mongolians that are part of China. That's a struggle ongoing.
Exactly.
Trying to keep the culture. So please don't use that again.
No. What I was trying, I don't have enough time to explain. Of course, what I was trying to say is that Chinese perceptions of Mongolian history and culture were present at this parade, but how Mongolians understand and perceive that was less present, and that's part of why Azza and these Mongolian participants wanted to go and participate in that. And so that's an opportunity to address this problem through this kind of initiative. Because I understand that history. You know, I'm not saying that Kublai Khan is Chinese or part of Chinese history. You know, but what I'm saying is that Chinese histories perceive him that way, portray him that way, and present that perspective to an American public. You know, so Americans think of Marco Polo going to China to meet a Chinese emperor, for example, and then that history gets presented to an American public, and then here's an opportunity where the Mongolian history of that is possible. Yeah.
On the flip side, there's an opportunity to correct it, but then it kind of perpetuates that notion of, oh, it's a Chinese festival. Oh yeah, the Mongolians were there. Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking from the outside, not from
Yeah.
the outside.
I've been participating in that parade for the third time already.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it without us all these years. They've been using Jansunov music in the parade.
Oh.
And they made Kublai Khan, that dummy, with without any participation of Mongolian culture or community, and people found out about it and told me about it. So we decided to take part in it and put Mongolian elements into it. They've been doing it without us all this time, for 8, 9 years. And we started participating, and we were like, okay, let's build a gear. Hey, let's, I'm going to put on my
educate.
Exactly.
And question was, how did you learn?
And we asked people to come from DC to participate, but they're like, oh, we want money. We want these. And we're like, oh, we don't have the money to give. So we've been doing it for 3 years in a row, on our own with very little support.
Yeah.
And I even I even talked to Professor Atwood to learn about Silk Road, to learn about Marco Polo. And I made a pamphlet, like a really short pamphlet, about Mongol Empire's contribution to the Silk Road and Marco Polo's, his journey. And I gave it out to people. It's like, hey, this is who we are. This is the Mongol Empire's story. That's when Silk Road was the most successful because Mongol Empire was there.
Thank you.
And we do not participate, and if we become part of those things, they will tell our stories without us. Without
and so this kind of work is not a platform to take people into some pre-existing festival unless people want to do that. This is a platform. This demonstrates the need, why this kind of work can be needed, can be useful and important to communities to represent themselves. And this is just an example of the kind of cultural landscape we're working in. So, but how did I learn Mongolian? In Mongolia. I lived in Mongolia for 3 years, and the first 2 years I was teaching English, and I wanted to play music with Mongolian musicians, but Mongolian musicians didn't speak English because they couldn't afford the English lessons, so they would talk to me only in Mongolian. They'd be like, Nash, Ogwe, and then I learned a lot of Mongolian that way, though. It was very good.